It's also accepting if we're going to have a peaceful time. We'll get the right one up here. Having all kinds of tech problems. There we go. We're unlocking the power of solitude. We need to accept that everything is a cycle. I was talking about this a little bit earlier in the show, in fact, a few minutes ago. Everything is a cycle. What that means is that if you're showing up in a certain way, there are going to be moments where you're going to not be strong. There are going to be moments when you're tired. There's going to be moments when you're weak. You might not like to hear that. I don't like to say it, but my job is to be real with you. There's going to be moments where you're not going to show up, frankly, as your best self. One of the best things we can do is actually, number one, give ourselves a grace. And number two, that accept that it's a cycle. When we talk about we have to grind every single day, that we cannot waste a moment. And we plan on doing this for the long haul. Are we if you're grinding every single day and every moment, you don't stop, you don't take care of yourself, you don't rest. Are you really thinking long term? Again, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm halfway through my life. Even I'm like, okay, well, the second half of my life, or whatever, knock on wood, whatever's left, being on all five cylinders the whole time, it ain't gonna get you there. You're not gonna make it. If you're really about the long-term strategy, if you're really about the long game, shout out to Dory Clark. If you're really about the infinite game, shout out to Simon Sinek. I can speak all day about it. Shout out to both of them. If you're really about that long-term strategy, then you can't be about constant grind. Like you, like you can't. They're not compatible. They're not on the same street. They're not on the same zip code. Nowhere near. If you're after social justice, shout out to my social justice warriors. If you're really about making impact on the world and making it more equitable, if you're really about uplifting your community and getting to the next level, you have to accept that everything goes into a cycle. There is no constant grind. There's a constant showing up, but there's no constant grind. When you get into understanding that things are a cycle, then it forces you to think more long term. If you think about I think it was the Viking saying, at least I know it from the Vikings. It was probably some people before the Vikings that talked about first we feast, which is what the TV channel, that Hot Ones, if you're familiar with the Hot Ones show, with the hot wings, where people go on an interview. It's the company's called First We Feast. It comes from that term. So they did not invent the term. That's why if you look at the logo, it looks like there's a bunch of hairy Viking face on there, right? So that's where the history of the name of that production company comes from. I digress. It's like at dawn we go to war, but first we feast. It's not necessarily about we're going to go ahead and we just want to party, though. I'm sure they were partying like it could have been their last party because for a lot of them it probably was. Shout out to them for embracing that life is short because it is. It also meant we need to eat and drink and be merry and get our reserves together so that at dawn we'll be in our best fighting shape. You hear me? First we feast. Sometimes it cuts off there, but there's more to it. First we feast, then we ride at dawn. Why don't they just ride through the night? Why don't they just keep going? I'm sure there are really strong men and some women in there too. Why didn't they just keep going? Why didn't they just fight 24/7 if they really wanted to take over that territory or, get their women and children back, whatever the vibe was at that period of time? Even they knew, as savage and as intense and whatever cultural, compared to today's culture, however we might feel about that particular time in the Middle Ages or before that, they had the common sense to say, we need to rest first. We need to eat, drink, and be merry so that when we're on the battlefield, we're ready. again, if you're really about that life as far as making social change, and a lot of people that I coach, it's not just a side hustle. It's not just a um, soulpreneurship. It's not just I'm going to build something and then get it acquired later or make a bunch of money, sell some stuff to people, invest in capitalism. For a lot of us, it's not just that. I'd say for almost everyone I coach, it's not. In fact, for everyone I coach, it's not just that. I'm guessing since you're watching the show, it's not just that for you too. It's also making a long-term impact. You cannot make a long-term impact without taking care of yourself. It's not possible. It's like you can't be a fully present parent to your kids if you're not taking care of yourself as much as possible. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It doesn't mean that you need to have a vacation all that time. Like, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the higher that we're able to take care of ourselves, the higher we're able to lead other people, period. And so, again, if you're really about that life, my career path and the work that I'm doing with this show and with the best-selling books and stuff, that started when I was a grad student, very long time ago. If I hadn't rested, if I hadn't taken care of myself, then I wouldn't be here now. I'm positive. And there were a couple of years there where your boy almost didn't make it, where I was so burnt out, so worn out, I was done. And luckily, I was able to use these restorative practices to get back to myself. And luckily, I learned those lessons when I was much younger. So accept that everything is a cycle. You're not going to be on the grind all the time. That's okay. My favorite book, Rest is Resistance by Dr. Tricia Hersey. Shout out to her. Fantastic little book. She's the founder of the NAP Ministry, where it was people organized. I believe it started in Georgia, maybe in Atlanta. Excuse me. And she would organize people to rest, mostly people of color, because proportionally, we're a little bit more susceptible to burn ourselves out for many deep systemic and cultural reasons, which I'll have to save for another show. This is one of those shows today that it could be 4 hours long, but for my own sake of rest, we'll keep it to an hour. Fantastic book. It talks about the history of rest, particularly when it comes to minorities and/or people of color, particularly Black people. It talks about how we can integrate rest into our lives and why taking a nap, daydreaming, and resting is actually a rebellious, anarchist, revolutionary thing, particularly for people that look like me. You think about women in the 50s, particularly those that were homemakers who were not given the respect that that was a full-time job. I'm a homemaker myself, run several businesses, and also I'm the main one that takes care of the house. So you got my sympathy for what y'all were going through 60 years ago. You think about the person who's a minority that has to, in some cases, work twice, three times as hard to get the recognition of other cultures, other people, to get the respect because they're doubted. There's a weight and there's a shame and there's a guilt that comes from us pausing to actually take care of ourselves because we have so much further to go, because we fought so hard to get to this point, because I have personally ancestors that died for my right to vote, my right to own a house or have an apartment, my right to marry someone who's outside of my culture. Born in any other time, my life personally will look very different. Even owning multiple businesses. Are you kidding? I'm talking to y'all on the air about once, twice a week. I can say darn near what I want, and no one's going to come knocking at the door. Hopefully. Knock on wood on that one. So if you know your history, particularly if you come from a culture where you weren't always given those freedoms, once you have those freedoms, stopping feels like an indulgence. It feels like a disrespect to your ancestors. But Dr. Hersey's actually arguing the reverse. As they say, I and we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. I'm thinking where my family line was 150 years ago. Here I am in a Brooks Brothers style suit, talking to 18,000 plus subscribers and who knows else all around the world, raising my beautiful black and brown kids and making a good living and supporting y'all in your revolutionary acts. They wanted to be able to rest, but they couldn't. We have the opportunity to do so now, even if it's, as we talked about in the previous segment, even if it's in micro moments. This, I just scratched the surface on this book. Probably my favorite book of the year, hands down. It's, whew, Dr. Hersey, you're doing killer work. The episode from last week plays into this, how to make a peaceful, affordable holiday. There's going to be some holidays that you have, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Yom Kippur, pick one, Hanukkah, Diwali, Bhai Beach. Like I can keep going. There's going to be some holidays that you have with your family, not so much chosen family, but with your blood relatives or people that raise you that aren't going to go so well. And there's going to be other ones that go great. Your job is to find a place of peace and rest, no matter what those circumstances are. Even again, if it's just for a moment. Sometimes a moment is all you have, and sometimes a moment is all you need. Be sure to check out last week's episode if you're worried about that particularly. Again, there's a really intense political climate. There's a lot of deep conversations we're probably going to be having during the holidays as things wind up here and wind down here. A little bit of both here in America. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise not traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring North TV every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. How are you feeling as far as your guilt and shame around about taking a break? Because that's really key to understanding and resting within a sense of peace of mind and solitude. In other words, that reflectiveness, that stillness, that solitude doesn't really work if you feel guilt, which means internally you feel like you should be doing something else, or if you feel shame, which means you think you're going to be judged because you're not doing something else. Solitude and stillness don't quite work that well in that environment because you're worried about what you should be doing versus just doing what you're doing. How have you dealt with that? Jump into the comments. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts.